Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. I felt like doing that. Today we're looking at the Riphook Razor Bow. The Riphook Razor Bow is definitely a very interesting one. And you know what? People make fun of me for saying they're all interesting, but they are all interesting. I don't care what you guys say. I love looking at the unique items. Somebody spent a lot of time on these unique items, and they literally thought about what they were going to do with these unique items, and they had fun with it. And this is definitely one that it seems like they had a lot of fun with. The entire idea behind this bow is that it rips and it hooks and it causes lots of damage and it rips out things and it does a good job at it too. It is a razor bow, which is a -10 base. I'm pretty sure it's a -10 base, but I always like to double check myself because sometimes I forget. Yes, it is a -10 base, which means it's an extremely fast bow. We also have a 25 to 70 damage on this, which is relatively nice for level 31. Certainly not poor. We do have 62 dex and 25 strength requirement, which means that just about anybody can utilize this bow. It does have a very fast attack speed, including a 30% increased attack speed. So not only is this already in a -10 base, but it is also in a bow that has 30% increased attack speed. And you could always, of course, add a shale rune, increasing it even further to 50% increased attack speed. And you could make it just an insanely fast bow that you could fire, just insanely quickly. As you can see, even just regular shots, very, 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 very fast with the shale in there. And then on top of that, if we were to use something like strafe with this particular bow, you would definitely see some crazy levels of speed on our arrows, just absolutely just demolishing our targets. Now this is hell difficulty, and this is players 5, and as you can see, I'm not doing very well with a nightmare level bow, but I'm still able to kill things. Like, it's actually not terrible in the regards of the kind of damage I'm outputting. And the reason is because it does have some interesting mechanics which allow it to dish out more damage than it might otherwise. Most notably is the open wounds. So let's take a look at this bow and let's get a good idea of what it does. Gotta run back to town. I don't want to get muted. So we got our nice 30% increased attack speed, which is of course 50% once you throw on the shale rune, which is kind of insane for a bow. We also have 220% enhanced damage. Now this does vary from 180 to 220%, so a 40% variable there. We also have a 10% lifesteal, which also varies from 7 to 10%. And then we have a 30% chance of open wounds, which of course is going to be damage based on character level. Of 8 seconds. So it lasts for 8 seconds. It causes a bleed on the target. Once the monster is bleeding, they literally will just continue bleeding for 8 seconds. They cannot regenerate during this time period, and it definitely makes for a very interesting effect. So not only are we stealing life and bringing it back to ourselves, we are also causing the monster's life to just simply drain away into nothingness. Then we also have a slows target effect of 30%, which means that any monster that we hit will have a very nice slow applied to them and allow us to get, more shots in, obviously, because it's going to have a hard time kind of trying to get us. We also have plus 35 mana on this bow, which is very nice. Any character who has played an Amazon at any point will tell you that mana is definitely an issue with a Amazon, whether you are playing a freezing arrow Amazon, a exploding arrow Amazon, or a physical Amazon. It doesn't matter. Mana is definitely needed for all of these abilities, and it's definitely nice to have them, especially when you're using multi-shot that costs like 33 mana a shot, or strafe that costs 11 mana a shot, or freezing arrow that costs 16 mana a shot, or so forth and so on. It's all kind of crazy in the mana cost, so having a little bit of extra mana can definitely be very useful. Now, granted, this is not going to be useful for a bow merc, but it is what it is. This bow is pretty good for a bow merc. If you throw a shale rune in it early on and you put this on a bow merc, not only does it have lifesteal to help keep her alive, she's also applying a open wounds to targets and slowing them down for you, both which can be extremely useful to you as a character. Now, granted, the Boson, or rather the bow merc, was not always the most amazing merc. However, nowadays the bow merc has become kind of insane, and combined together with her freezing arrow, the additional slows target can certainly add an additional element of crowd control to this mercenary that otherwise might not normally be there. At level 31, you're using this before you leave normal difficulty, which means if I take this and I could just strip off some equipment, it doesn't even really matter. Let's just strip off what we've got here. And I'll just literally go naked into normal difficulty in like River of Flame. And I'm going to show you guys that this bow kind of demolishes normal difficulty where it is first put on. And you don't really leave normal difficulty until you're like around level 40, 45. That's usually a right level. So if I were to go, like, for instance, to the River of Flame and take this bow down here and maybe use Strafe, which seems like a good option, I could very easily demolish just about everything down here with ease. And this is Players 5. I'm still on Players 5. And we could also use Multi-Shot, which would also still do pretty well, and would also apply our nice slows target to everything. We still got our... it's just a very nice bow in general. I've always been particularly fond of Riphook. The main issue with Riphook is that the damage on it kind of doesn't scale up very well because it is a faster bow and not a high damage bow. When you get into the higher levels, you will run into issues with this particular bow kind of being outpaced by other options. Let me see if I can show you guys. So it's not a normal difficulty bow, it's exceptional level bow, but it does upgrade once to the elite tier, and we're going to play around with that right now. We're actually going to upgrade this to the elite tier. So to do that, you're going to need a Pull rune, you're going to need a Lame rune, and you're going to need a Perfect Emerald. And this is going to upgrade from the Riphook Razor Bow to the Blade Bow, if I remember correctly. And it's going to go from 25 to 70, 62 dex, 25 strength, level 31, to the 67 to 131 damage, 119 dex, 76 strength, level 52. So as you can see here, the damage just didn't really go up very high at all. Because this blade bow base has a relatively low physical damage. It is a nice upgrade, and if you were using the bow girl, you could definitely get some good use out of it. And even on the Amazon, if you were an elemental damage Amazon, you could still get good use out of it. The physical damage not going up very high, though, doesn't really help out its case. I feel like in most situations with this particular bow, you probably would just utilize it with elemental damage attacks, mainly because it's extremely fast. So number one, it's extremely fast. Number two, it allows you to obviously slow down all targets around you even after you've frozen them. So as you can see here, not only is the target frozen, they also will be slowed down even if they're not frozen. So like for instance with Shank, who is always immune to cold, despite the fact that he's immune to cold, I can still slow him down with the effects. So if I were to switch over to say something like multi-shot, all the monsters would be slowed down by 30% because of the Riphook's ability, and they're all bleeding, I'm sure at this point, because at 30% open wounds, every one of them should be bleeding very nicely. If you ever are wondering if a monster is bleeding, you can usually see it very well in the older version of the game versus the newer version of the game. And in this particular case, I'd probably want to be using Exploding Arrow, because Exploding Arrow does a hell of a lot more damage to monsters that are immune to cold. Oh no, I'm out of arrows. No! No! Well, out of arrows is out of arrows. And that is a kind of a downside of the extremely fast bows, as you will run out of arrows extremely fast. But all in all, the Riphook is definitely a bow that I feel like belongs in the bottom and mid tiers. It is not something that you're probably going to be using at Endgame. I wouldn't recommend it anyway, mainly due to the fact that the low physical damage combined with the fact that it doesn't really have anything super special on it that would make you want to use this as like an Endgame level item. Like, for instance, the Wiz and Draw has negative enemy cold resistance. The Kuko Kushaku has a very nice plus to skills for exploding arrows and additional fire damage. We have, obviously the Crusader Horn ignores target's defense. We've got the Wind Force Bow, just has extremely high physical damage. In general, this particular bow just kind of lacks that like end game mechanic that makes it super useful. One thing that you could do with this, though, that I think would be relatively useful is if you put this on a low-level bow girl and you throw a Neff rune in here for knockback, or you give her knockback in some other way, combined with the slows target, having slows target, knockback, and open wounds together as a trio for a low-level Amazon or a mercenary can be extremely effective to just like murderize just about everything, even if you can't necessarily kill them with brute force. So it's interesting. I do think, though, that Riphook ends up getting passed up by a lot of people just simply because of that low physical damage. I'd like to see the physical damage increased a little bit. Maybe even like the 220% enhanced go up to maybe like 250 or maybe even 270%. And I would like to see the variable reduced a little bit because the damage on this bow is actually pretty bad. Physically, it's just not really a very high damage bow. I mean, granted, Amazons do obviously have pretty much like massive critical strike, which they can obviously apply to everything, and they can multiply their damage out nicely using things like a piercing effect. But for the most part, when it comes to a bow that has low physical damage, you're kind of relegated to, okay, well, what can I do with it besides things like multi-shot or strafe? Now, granted, multi-shot will still come in handy because you can apply that slow to multiple targets. And especially if you were using knockback along with the slow, it could potentially end up being a game changer as far as like keeping monsters away from you. Because not only are you slowing them down, you're also knocking them back and slowing them down, which may make it next to impossible for them to actually reach you. Let's take a look real quick at Silo's Pen, and let's see where we could potentially find this item if we wanted to get our hands on it. Although, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever had any trouble finding Riphook. I usually end up finding 2 or 3 of them, pretty much every time I level up. So, I mean, there is that going for this particular item, I feel like, is that it's pretty common. And because it's common, it could definitely be used relatively easily for a lot of characters. So let's take a look at normal difficulty real quick and see if this drops anywhere in normal. Normal Diablo, not bad, 1 in 653, and Bale at 1 in 515. So normal Diablo is probably your best bet for farming this, pretty much bar none. We also have Neelathak at 1 in 4092 in normal, and Super Uniques. We are looking at Pintle Skin, 1 in 6,076, not bad. Thresh Socket, 1 in 6,138, and I mean, Frozenstein's not really easy to farm, so I'm not really going to talk about him. I mean, it's not bad, and even if you're farming Bale for EXP, it looks like Lister, Ekmel the Curse, Bartuk the Bloody, Kalenzo, and Ventar have a chance of dropping it as well. So not bad. Even Sharp-Toothed Slayer in Frigid Highlands has a decent chance here. I mean, we've got a lot of normal difficulty options, and it seems like you could probably pick this up relatively easy in normal before you leave. And as far as nightmare difficulty options are concerned, I mean, we got a lot of options here as well. The Countess, Bonebreaker, Bishy Boss, Cold Crow, Corpse Fire, Treehead Woodfish, Rockanishu, Bone Ash in nightmare difficulty. Those are all Act 1 nightmare options, and definitely very good options for farming something like this early on in your nightmare career. And Dariel in nightmare, also very good chance at 1 in 548. So not bad. I think that's maybe is one of the biggest pros of this particular bow is that it is so easy to come by, and it is honestly better than using some rare bow or like a blue bow or something. It may not be better than a rune word choice, but that open wounds and the slowest target can certainly come in handy along with the lifesteal. especially if you're just trying to build an early level mercenary, that can actually do something and support you. A lot of the times people have issues building mercenaries, and let me tell you, 10% lifesteal, 30% open wounds, and slows target 30% is going to make it a hell of a lot easier for your mercenary to stay alive, combined with the increased attack speed. And if you throw a Nef rune in there, you could definitely have a mercenary who's going to be useful for a little while, actually keeping things alive. Granted, though, if you're a melee character, you may not want to throw the Nef rune in there because, well, you don't want monsters getting knocked back. It's going to slow down your overall kill speed. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we are ripping and hooking things. And as always, keep watching.